He said about a month ago in November, you gave a talk at a synagogue in Los Angeles about the current situation by way of terror here, where you said, I quote, "While we condemn Palestinian violence, we must recognize this painful truth, that Israel policy has encouraged it. Israel has encouraged it by penalizing Palestinian non-violence, by responding to that non-violence by deportations, tear gas, imprisonment, and the confiscation of Palestinian land. Hard as it is to say, the Israeli government is reaping what it has sown. 23 people have now been murdered. Do you stand by those comments, and why, if you do?"
Yes, sadly I'm not unfamiliar with Palestinian terrorism. One of my closest friends from university was killed in a bus bomb in the mid-1990s. He didn't know this, but I actually had thought that one day he might be the rabbi at my wedding, because he was studying for smicha at the time. I don't minimize Palestinian terrorism. I had a large suggestion, a large section of that speech, which I could quote to you, was about how horrifying and monstrous I consider Palestinian terrorism, how corrupting it is of the Palestinian national movement, and how any effort to justify Palestinian terrorism or any terrorism is utterly, utterly unacceptable. What I was trying to talk about is how to defeat Palestinian terrorism. And what I was saying was actually very similar to something that last month the IDF Chief of Military Intelligence, Herzl Halevi, said, when he said that one of the causes of this monstrous violence is that you have a younger generation of Palestinians who believe they have nothing to lose. If you want Palestinians to fight for their rights in a way that is decent and nonviolent and accepts Israel's right to exist, it is very important that we show that when Palestinians do that, they get somewhere. They get somewhere. And I want to quote you something that Salam Fayyad said. I think we can all agree that Salam Fayyad was a Palestinian politician who a lot of Israeli Jews, even Israeli Jewish hawks, liked, because he accepted Israel's right to exist. He did security cooperation. He fought corruption. I'll tell you what this is what Salam Fayyad said when he left Palestinian politics. Quote, "Israel never got behind me. In fact, it was quite hostile. The occupation regime is more entrenched, with no sign it is beginning to relinquish its grip on our life. We have sustained a doctrinal defeat we have not delivered. I represent the address for failure. Meanwhile, Hamas is strengthened." If we want to defeat Hamas, and we want to defeat those people who are committing these terrible, terrible acts around Israel, we have to show Palestinians that there is a non-violent way of achieving the basic rights that we would want for ourselves. The right to be citizens of a country, the right to live under the same law as your neighbors, the right to free movement, the right to vote for the government that controls your lives. I am motivated because I believe, as many in the Israeli security establishment do, without the prospect for a Palestinian state, that we will be playing into the hands of those horrific murderers who are now stalking the Jewish people.
We have, in the last few weeks, we've seen a number of horrible terror attacks around the world, including California just recently, Paris, of course, Mali, and Israel, as we have on a daily basis. Do you believe there is a double standard to when terror attacks around the world and when they're in Israel?
Well, Peter, I've become much more prickly since our last debate at Columbia. Every time I criticize one of your views, you fall back on the old debate tactic of accusing me of ad hominem. When you write things, you are responsible for them, and you must defend them. There's nothing personal about it at all. You publish these columns, and you need to defend your views, not hiding behind reams and reams of paper, not quoting every other person because your own views cannot withstand logical, rational, values-based scrutiny. Quote all the people you want, and it won't change the illogical positions you are spouting. And if you want, I will answer your question. I'm just going to go through some of them. Firstly, my friends, do any of you really believe that a woman is raped because of how she dresses? Did any of you believe that had she not shown sexual interest in a man, that she might have been left alone? Or is she a victim and he is the aggressor, period? Do any of you believe that there's anything that African Americans did to invite the abomination of American slavery, the abomination of Jim Crow and segregation. My God, how dare we blame the victim? Peter actually wrote, and by the way, here Peter is an equal opportunity offender. To answer your question directly, whether he singles out Israel, he often does. I was actually amazed that he was praising Israel within the green line, because in his book, The Crisis of Zionism, he really portrays Israel as a semi-racist country within the green line. You can read the book yourself. You should especially read Brett. Excuse me, I didn't interrupt you. Thank you. You will have every opportunity to respond. Thank you, Peter. You should read Brett Stevens' dismantling of his book, the Wall Street Journal Foreign Affairs columnist. I've never seen a more devastating book review like the one Brett wrote about Peter's book. The book barely survives the review. But Peter actually says that 9/11 happened because of American foreign policy in the Middle East. He said it was a twisted, distorted response. Those 3,000 Americans who died, you know what their crime was? It was to get up extra early. They were the best employees. The day after Labor Day, to feed their babies. They died because of pure, rabid hatred, and there was no excuse. And the Israelis who are being slaughtered and stabbed and killed today, like the Parisians who are being stabbed and murdered, like the innocent Californians in San Bernardino, they are the victims of pure hatred. I'm amazed that Peter can contradict himself in the very same sentence. There is no reason, but I will give you a reason. There's no justification, but Israeli policies are motivating this. No, my friends, there is zero truth to that. Israel withdrew from Gaza completely in 2005, even though Peter accuses Israel of not having withdrawn. There's no Israeli soldier there. There are no Israeli settlers there. They were all forcibly dismantled. We all watched it on international TV, even on media outlets that aren't that friendly to Israel. And you know what Israel got in return? 10,000 rockets designed to slaughter Jews, and there is no occupation in Gaza. And there was no occupation. Notice that Peter will use phraseology, and he'll let it pass. But I'm not going to allow him to let it pass. Notice that he said before, when Israel took over the West Bank. Does anyone remember Israel taking over the West Bank? I seem to remember in 1967 that in a surprise war of annihilation launched by Egypt and Syria, and later by Jordan, Israel was forced to defend itself. It got those territories. In fact, they are ancient biblical lands, Judea and Samaria. That's also undeniable. It's in the Bible. And we have found limitless Jewish artifacts in all of those areas. But I seem to remember that the Israeli leadership went to the Arabs, especially through Moshe Dayan, and said, take it all back. And we want peace. And the Arabs responded with the famous 3 no's in Khartoum. You remember them. Say them with me. No peace, no negotiation, no recognition. You mentioned Ehud Barak. Ehud Barak's whole government fell because he offered Yasser Arafat 97% of the West Bank in 2001 under President Bill Clinton at Camp David. Arafat rejected it. Olmert made virtually the same offer to Mahmoud Abbas in 2008. They rejected it. Polls consistently show that our Palestinian brothers and sisters in the West Bank, about 50%, would never agree to Israel's existence, even with the total relinquishing, if Israel were to withdraw. But here's something even more significant. What would happen if Israel withdrew? See, Peter's entire argument is the Israeli occupation. And he's basically a BDSer. You can call him BDS light. I think he went over to full BDS when he suddenly called, for Naftali Bennett, minister in the Israeli government, to be sanctioned economically. He went into full BDS. But either as it may, notice Peter doesn't call for a boycott of Apple computer and an iPhone, even though it's made in China, which has been occupying Tibet since 1951, longest occupation in modern history. He doesn't call for a boycott of Okay, but he will focus specifically on Israel. And it's not that it's just a double standard. Peter raises an impossible standard. He won't allow Israel to simply defend itself. So when it comes to giving a justification for terror, there is often a double standard, but here I have to praise Peter. It's the same standard. He often blames Western democracies whose innocent citizens are attacked by terrorists, and there is no justification for terrorism whatsoever. Every human life is of infinite value, and we must always establish it thus. Thank you.